President Trump says his administration is in the process of notifying the states whose election data was compromised by China. Joining us now to discuss is Rod Martin, foreign policy analyst and founder and CEO of Martin Capital. So, thank you for joining us today, Rod. So, when you first heard Trump say last night that China acquired some 220 million U.S. voter files, that's like names, addresses, phone numbers, affiliations politically. What was going through your mind when you heard that?
Well, it's just horrifying, but it actually tracks very well with a segment in which you and I discussed a related Chinese endeavor a year ago, in which it has been discovered and declassified and disclosed that the Chinese were actually processing the data on the back end of a lot of states' voting machines. So the data, which is supposed to stay in the United States, actually was being transmitted out of the country. We've had cases where it was going into German servers and Venezuelan servers, but the Chinese servers, in light of this revelation, are all the more damning. And the truth of the matter is that in that same discussion you and I had, we talked about the fact that it has now been revealed that the Chinese had printed at least 60,000 fake ballots just in California, just that they were able to catch. Now, if they found 60,000 fake ballots, how many more were out there? So you put it all together. You have the Chinese actually hacking 220 million voter records in 18 targeted states that we know of. We know they were in a position to be able to manipulate the back end data from the voting machines. We also know they were printing fake ballots, and that costs money. You don't do that if you don't mean to do something with them nefarious. So that really brings us to the fourth point, which is the most crucial of all. The idea that the American intelligence community would downplay this in the president's daily briefing when it needed to be acted on, it needed to be highlighted, it needed to be investigated, it needed to be solved. And instead, our intelligence community hid this information not only from the president, but therefore from law enforcement. So, in a very real sense, whether they were in direct communication with the Chinese or not is irrelevant. They were complicit. They were enabling this to happen. And that's borderline coup d'etat territory.
And DHS Secretary Mark William Mullen said that as well today, that there's no question that the intelligence community did what you said, that they were hiding this information. So what is the national security implication right now?
Well, it's extraordinary. I mean, with regard to the Chinese, that's an issue for diplomacy. We're not going to go bomb Beijing over this, but I don't doubt that this president will do things that are rather forceful, at least metaphorically. Internally, we have a much greater problem. And the first one is one I've been highlighting for 30 years. I've been involved in politics since I was a teenager. I've been on various Republican county, state, national committees. I've been trying to sound the alarm from the beginning. There is no such thing as an unhackable voting machine. In fact, I've seen children hack voting machines. It's not really that hard. What is hard is to detect it, because the people responsible for supervising elections have no capacity whatsoever to see if some virus has been introduced into a voting machine, if some algorithm is there that switches some X number of ballots. They have no way to know, none whatsoever. And anytime they plug it into the internet to get a software update, there's a risk. This has been completely ignored by most county clerks in most of the United States. That's just not what they do. It is essential that federal law enforcement and ideally the intelligence community would be on top of that. The truth is they're not. So you really need to get rid of the voting machines. There is no secure election that is vaguely possible without paper ballots. Elon Musk has been sounding the alarm on that for a couple years. Praise God for him. We've got to take it seriously. Voting machines are vulnerable, period. And nothing is going to change that except banning them.
And the other good thing about paper ballots is that you can't hack a piece of paper, right? But I want
Well,
to
no, and it's even more than that, Don. We know all the ways you can cheat. People have been cheating with paper ballots for centuries. So we figured it out, and it's stuff you can teach volunteers. People can actually understand how to police this. They can't police lines of code.
Right, right. I wanted to follow up on a point you made earlier about China's intentions. You were saying along the lines that China wouldn't do this if they didn't have a goal in mind. So what do you think they could potentially do if they had hundreds of millions of U.S. voter files? I mean, could it allow them to map demographics, for example, identify swing areas?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And to the degree that this involved targeting messages at specific groups of people for the purpose of, for instance, starting riots, causing various civil unrest, to the degree they're doing that, this data was invaluable for proper targeting of that sort of messaging. But we know that's not all there was to it, because we know that they had access to the back end data for these voting machines, which they could have manipulated in China, not even on the local machines. We also know they're printing ballots. Okay, well, why would you do that? Well, obviously, the United States has done a lot of things that benefit China, whether you're talking about admitting them to the World Trade Organization under Clinton, or choosing not to enforce a particular tariff, or whatever you can come up with to achieve those kinds of policy goals. You actually need people in the United States in positions of power to execute on that. Not necessarily because they're engaged in espionage or working directly with the Chinese. That's probably not true in most cases. But having people who are friendly to China as opposed to people who are not friendly to China in key positions is definitely a goal that would make you want to cheat if you could bring that about. And in the case of Donald Trump, he is the first president in any of our lifetimes since Richard Nixon before 1971, who has meaningfully opposed the CCP in any way. During the Cold War, that made sense because we were triangulating against the Soviet Empire. That's all fine. After the Cold War, it's been more sinister. It has had some ugly effects, and only Donald Trump has stood up to them. Of course, they wanted him out of office.
And one thing I find incredible is that this operation that China is doing, it's massive. So it seems like it doesn't even care about being found out because of how big this thing is. It's just brazenly doing this. Maybe I'm being naive here about China's intentions, but it seems like they don't even care about being found out.
Well, the thing is, if the intelligence community, and the documents are very clear, the White House declassified them and uploaded them to the internet. Anybody can read them for themselves. If the intelligence community was actually downplaying the threat, they had cover within the intelligence community. How much of that did they know about? Well, I don't know, but we just had sentencing, I believe today, of a former high-ranking Federal Reserve official who was charged with economic espionage on behalf of the Chinese. He was in contact with Chinese agents on a regular basis for years. Money changed hands, the whole thing, and he's going to prison now. Okay, so we know that Chinese espionage has compromised senior government officials. How many people in the intelligence community fall in that category? And that's exactly what John Ratcliffe has to deal with right now. And not just him, but Kash Patel, because this is a counter intel op. If you don't actually deal with the people who may either be compromised or complicit without meaning to, you're never going to get to the root of this. But ultimately, our intelligence community was running interference for the Chinese Communist Party. That's what the documents show. And they did it to prevent Donald Trump from knowing and thus being able to do anything about it in 2020. And then the Biden team just didn't care. It's very, very clear from how they handled this afterward that that just wasn't something they wanted to deal with, in part, no doubt, because they didn't want the possibility of delegitimizing Biden's election. But they left the vulnerabilities intact, and the Chinese can still exploit those vulnerabilities on an ongoing basis if nothing is done.
Well, it appears like the Trump administration right now is taking these vulnerabilities, these gaps more seriously. Let's see if over time they can close these gaps. But let me just get your opinion on one last thing here, Rod. What do you think about mail-in ballots?
Mail-in ballots are a disaster. I mean, it's just an invitation to fraud. Take California, where they just mail ballots to every known address. However many people have ever lived there, they don't clean the rolls. They've made a big deal of, if we clean the voter rolls, that's voter suppression. No, if 7 people have lived at an apartment and they were all registered to vote over a period of 10 years, and you send 7 ballots to that apartment, first of all, you're not being accurate. You're not getting it to the voter. But second, that's just an invitation for someone to pick up those 7 ballots, mark them, and then hand them to a ballot harvester who puts them in one of the drop boxes. It is utterly insecure. It's crazy. No one in the world does this except certain parts of the United States. And that has to be cleaned up. There's, our liberal friends are always telling us how much better Europe is. No European country allows this. No European country doesn't require voter ID. All these things that are in the Save America Act are just common sense reforms that every serious country on earth implemented long ago. And so this is something we have to act on immediately. The Senate's got to move the Save America Act. And if not, I would encourage the president to look at Article 4 of the Constitution, which requires the federal government to guarantee a Republican form of government to each of the 50 states. If you don't have free and fair elections, you don't have a Republican form of government. And it is absolutely essential that the president use his constitutional powers to ensure the security of our elections.
And the other thing about mail-in ballots is that it could potentially delay the counting. I remember during the California counting process, I remember Vice President J.D. Vance saying that a week later, they weren't just counting the ballots, they were still receiving ballots. I remember J.D. Vance saying that. But Rod, thank you for speaking with us today. It's always good to have you on.
Good to be here.